Hello, everyone. My name is Phoenix Ablaze. Welcome to the Tiki Oasis monthly series, focusing on subjects of history, appropriation versus appreciation of cultures, minority cultures, Tiki culture, and mid-century Americana. The goal of this series is to provide a forum for education, knowledge, and conversation. Through this series, we invite marginalized groups to amplify their voices, to share their knowledge and experiences. We invite advocates and allies to ask questions, and we invite all to contribute to the broader discussion on diversity, inclusion, representation, and equality in the Tiki community. As we dive into our monthly series, there are many topics to unpack, discuss, and understand that are part of the current Tiki culture. To introduce our guest for this month, we have invited Ms. Tiki Oasis 2017, Di Lovely. San Diego's homegrown Tiki Queen is proud to be the first woman of color to win the Miss Tiki Oasis title. Di Lovely grew up as a Polynesian dancer performing for private events at the Bali High and the former Hanalei Hotel. She continued to perform at the competitive level with local dance troupes, but you may best recognize her as the Tiki Oasis Symposium instructor for the beginners hula dance class. Di Lovely had quickly become a sought-after burlesque artist, headlining festivals and teaching across North America to as far as the Philippines and Australia. She has also been the only San Diegan to compete multiple times at the International Burlesque Hall of Fame. This proud Pinay strives to bring visibility to the Filipinx performers as she curates the Burlesque Las Filipinx show, in which the event has garnered much attention with an entertainment cover featured in the LA Times and several podcasts, including the Desert Oasis Room. Here is Miss Di Lovely.
Hi.
Hi, Di. So good seeing you.
How are you? Long time no see.
I know. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. You know, this is a really special topic, and of course, it hits close to home being Filipino American. And Adrian is such a great resource to have, and I'm excited for all the information he's going to share with us today.
Same. Well, I'll let you get to it.
Okay. So for our topic this month, Tiki Oasis has invited Adrian Eustaquio to share with us the original Filipino bartenders of Don the Beachcomber and how they contributed to and influenced tropical drinks in the early days of Polynesian Pop. Throughout the conversation, please put your questions in the chat or Q&A section. Also, please note that this talk today is benefiting Adrian's Desert Oasis Room and his podcast to bring you more presentations related to Polynesian pop culture. And if you appreciate his presentation today, please consider donating at desertoasisroom.com/donate. Adrian Eustaquio is a longtime Tiki enthusiast, active member in the Tiki community, and avid supporter of the current Tiki revival. Considered as one of the major influencers of the Tiki scene, Adrian began collecting Tiki, Hawaiian, and South Pacific ephemera almost 3 decades ago and has been studying the mainland Tiki movement and its relation to American pop culture and cocktail culture, both currently and historically. Adrian is also the host and executive producer of Inside the Desert Oasis Room, a podcast recorded from his home Tiki space of the same name, and the Inside the Desert Oasis Room podcast eavesdrops on simulating and entertaining conversations with various artists, entertainers, mixologists, collectors, historians, enthusiasts, and more, while enjoying a round or two of tropical cocktails. On occasion, the podcast makes a field trip to record on location at other equally themed home spaces, bars, or live events. And I'm proud to introduce Adrian Eustaquio.
Aloha. Good morning.
Aloha. What's up, buddy?
And mabuhay.
Mabuhay.
We are sequestered to our private spaces at the moment, and I miss everybody. So, and I miss you. I miss seeing you in person.
I know. Yeah, we met a couple years back at 2017. I mean, of course, we've been around for a while, but just because when you won the best room party, right?
Right.
that year. And then I won the title. We're like, yeah, Filipino,
Yeah, right.
Filipino pride.
Right. Yeah, that was fun. That was Tiki Oasis. What was that? Was that 2017?
17, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm excited to present some history about our Filipino forefathers, our countrymen that helped put this genre and subculture, for lack of a better term, like this thing that we enjoy every
Mm-hmm.
day. And I'm still learning. There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we're very lucky to have you today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, and I just want to, really encourage viewers to subscribe to your podcast because you have a lot of amazing guests with so much information.
Thank you.
And it's a lot of fun too. You kind of feel like you're in the room with them and just having your own cocktail and just having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anyway, so I'll just let you get to it.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. Alrighty, here we go. Well, let me start by saying welcome to everybody out there who joined us on today's session. Aloha and mabuhay. Mabuhay is our word for aloha in the Philippine language. And so welcome and thank you. Before we get started, just a little bit about me. I've been an avid collector of Tiki and Hawaiiana for the better part of 3 decades. Started in somewhere in the early 90s, not knowing that I was collecting when I was just buying the things that I enjoyed. And through that particular process, I started learning about what is this whole Tiki thing. Is that being a historian, I don't know, lack of a better term again, historian, enthusiast. I love studying the genre. As an urban archaeologist, I love seeing what's still out there, seeing what is in place of what used to be out there. I am an amateur mixologist. I've never worked in a bar, but I enjoy that part of the culture as well, as we do make drinks here in the Desert Oasis Room when we record the podcast, and try to act as a responsible subculture and cultural ambassador to both Tiki and the Polynesian Pop movement. I've been published in a few things. So Imbibe Magazine, Tiki Magazine, Hanahu Magazine, been in a few articles and documentaries, presented a couple years ago at Comic-Con in San Diego. And I am the founder and principal of Desert Oasis Media. What I do is basically produce content for the web. That is my way of documenting my research. So documenting my research instead of writing a book, I'm basically doing that in a digital format through podcast interviews, vlogging events, and things similar to that, like urban archaeology, for example. So let's start with talking about the history of Tiki and the Tiki Bar. I think that this is something that just a kind of a quick rundown of what it is to get you to understand how the Filipino bartender came to be. So basically, this is a product of Prohibition, right? So Prohibition was this thing that happened in the United States that they called the Great Experiment. They thought that alcohol was causing all of the social ills in society, people that were jobless, people that were, lazy, or maybe people had social issues. They thought that alcohol, but by banning alcohol, it would solve some of those problems. And so they went into a period of prohibition. That started in January 28th, 1919. At that time, American spirits were completely affected. So whiskey, bourbon, all the things that were distilled here in mainland America were shut down. In so doing, people that still wanted to have their alcohol were producing their own spirits illegally in the form of moonshine. Over the years, people started, they started opening these like illegal secret societies, secret bars called speakeasies. The term speakeasy is basically, it's to whisper that so-and-so, there's a bar over here. If you go at this time and you knock on the door and you say certain thing or whatever, you can get in. These are secret drinking clubs. Foreign spirits were not affected by prohibition. Production of rum, vodka, all that stuff was produced overseas. And so they weren't really affected by prohibition the way that American based spirits were. And when prohibition was lifted on December 5th, that is, AKA, looks like I missed that one, is called Repeal Day. When bars started opening, rum was chosen by our favorite guy, Don the Beachcomber. And the reason why rum was chosen was because since it was produced overseas, it was not affected by production and it was cheap to obtain because, you know, if you were going to be trying to get whiskey or anything like that, a lot of those distilleries had to retool and there was a cost to that. Rum was readily available and it was cheap. So Don the Beachcomber. Who is Don the Beachcomber? His real name or birth name was Ernest Raymond Beaumont Gant, and he was a former bootlegger during that time of Prohibition. And he was an eccentric person. He did a lot of traveling, traveled the South Pacific, and he opened Don the Beachcomber on December 5th, 1933, on Repeal Day. It started at 1722 North Macadam Place in a hotel lobby, or in the corner of a hotel lobby. And a few years later, in 1937, is when he actually opened Don's Beachcomber Cafe across the street at 1727 North Macadam Place. If you go there today, it's just a giant apartment complex. Don's largely considered the godfather of Tiki because he started this whole tropical escapist environment. When I say here that he ushered in the concept of escapism, based on our research, he was the first guy to open that escapist tropical themed bar. Prior to Don, we had 13, 14 years of prohibition. And prior to that, I believe everything were saloons. So Don was really the first guy to start that tropical themed escapist environment. Here's a couple of pictures from his Don's Beachcomber Cafe. He had this tagline, if you can't get to paradise, I'll bring it to you. And so what Don did was he decorated his space with a lot of the things that he had collected in his travels when he was traveling in South Pacific, and created this themed tropical environment. Okay, so this is a slide of some of his alumni. Don employed a lot of people from the Filipino community. He was actually a champion of the community. He was somebody that always gave somebody a job. So if one of these folks came in and said, hey, Don, my brother needs a job. Do you think he can start in the kitchen? Or, hey, can he park cars or whatever it is? Don would give him a job. And so a lot of Filipinos ended up there because Filipinos are very family oriented. And if you look here, there are quite a few prominent names here, like Ray Buin, who started the Tiki Tea, Mariano Licudine, who started the bar program at the Mai-Kai, Dick Santiago, Hank Riddle, Leon Lontoc, Ray Barrientos, Conrad Lacerna, Tony Ramos. Tony Ramos, we're going to talk a little bit about him in a few minutes. But just to give you an example of how Don championed the community, the Filipino community, Dick Santiago, for example, was dating a white woman and they wanted to get married, and interracial marriage was illegal in California at the time. So Don helped him transfer to his Hawaii location so that he can marry his partner there, because at the time Hawaii wasn't a state and it was not illegal to have interracial marriage. So there's a lot of names here. I'm not going to go through and talk about each person just for the sake of time, and also because I don't have a lot of information on each person. But I also want to, before we go any further, I want to also point out that not all Filipino bartenders were at Don's. You had Bob Ismino, for example. He was a manager at the Tiki, and he and his brothers managed Tiki locations all at different times in all different locations. There's also Bobby Batugo, who doesn't really get a lot of attention, but he was also from that era. And he started out the Key Club. He ended up being the main guy at Tip's Restaurant, and he's a 3-time USBG cocktail champion. He's the only 3-time USBG champion. And then there's also the Cabang family, who opened the Royal Hawaiian here in Southern California in 1947. Something that I want to point out here is the Cabang family, when they opened the Royal Hawaiian, they opened it up as a family, ran it as a family. You look at Bob Ismino and his brothers, they were managing various Tiki locations. And if I go back to the previous slide, we look at Ray Buin, who founded the Tiki Tea. He went back and when he started running that bar, he ran it with his wife and eventually passed it down to his son and grandsons. Mario Licudine, when he was working at the Mai-Kai, he'd have his son come in on the weekend and help him make syrups. So very family oriented. So I want to highlight just a few of the main guys that you're probably most familiar with. Ray Buin is one of them. He immigrated from the Philippines in the 1920s, and his birth name is Ray Buhion. A lot of people don't know that. The reason why his name is Ray Buin today is he changed it to help himself assimilate to mainland United States. Ray worked everywhere that was Tiki. He started out at Don the Beachcomber in Hollywood. As a matter of fact, he was one of Don's original 4 Filipino bartenders. They called him the 4 Filipinos. From there, he worked at other spots, including the Luau, the Seven Seas, the China Trader, Palms in the Jungle, as well as Christian's Hut, which is pictured here on the left. Christian's Hut was a bar that was built by Clark Gable on the set of Mutiny on the Bounty. And he sent Ray out there and had him bartend for the duration of that filming. So Ray was out there bartending for the crew at the end of a day's worth of work. And eventually they moved that bar to Newport Beach, incorporated the Goof as a part of their decor. And the Goof sits on top of the Bali High in San Diego today on the roof. Some of the things that Ray is known for is at one time he was working at the Dresden in Hollywood. He retooled the Blood and Sand, which was named after a drink, after a movie that Tyrone Powers was starring in. And he was a very popular bartender. Ray had built a fan base that followed him from bar to bar. That's something that it happens today. I don't know how common that was then, but today there are people that follow their favorite bartenders from bar to bar. And that's something that Ray was doing in the early 20th century. He eventually founded the Tiki Tea, which translates into the God of Drink. And through what he practiced at Don's, he continued practicing that lost art of tropical mixology all the way into the 80s and 90s. And why is that significant? Because the 80s was labeled the decade of destruction. In the world of Tiki, that was when tastes changed and bars are being torn down left and right. And, you know, it's a lot of bars, in order to survive, dropped that practice of secret syrups and top-end ingredients and that art of the craft cocktail, the crafted tropical cocktail, because it had to survive. But at the Tiki Tea, Ray continued to practice that because that was his ethos. That's what he learned at Don the Beachcomber. Okay, so this is one of the things that I wanted to point out with Ray. If you look at their most popular drinks, the Bayanihan, the Chief Lapu Lapu, the Raised Mistake that was based on the Anting Anting. These are all drinks that are named with the Filipino language. So the Bayanihan, here they define it as togetherness or to be together. That is kind of a loose definition. There is also, you know, when you're moving house or helping family, that's also another way to define Bayanihan. Chief Lapu Lapu is the first Filipino war hero. He's revered in the Philippines because he defeated Magellan when Magellan tried to come in and conquer the Philippines. And Ray's Mistake is named after Ray himself when he poured the wrong syrups into an Anting Anting. The Anting Anting is the name for an amulet. And again, loosely defined, just like aloha has different, it can mean different things. It can also mean potion. And in this case, they use that name, Anting Anting, as witch's brew. If you look at this photo, you'll see Ray at the bottom left here. Something fun about what he used to do at the Tiki Tea is if you look at that sign on the wall, it says Tiki Tea Left-Handers Luau. And something that he used to do there is what's called the Left-Handers Club. If you opted to participate in the Left-Handers Club, basically you had to drink all of your drinks with your non-dominant hand. And if you got caught using your dominant hand, you had to put a little bit of change in a little coin jar. And at the end of the year, Ray would have a left-handers luau for everybody that participated. He would use the money from that coin jar. And that's what you're seeing in that sign there. Later on, I'm going to be loading some footage from a left-handers luau. I've been holding it for a while, and I've been saving it for the 60th anniversary of the Tiki Tea, which will be happening this April. So watch out for that. I think you'll enjoy that. But the main thing here also that I wanted to point out is by passing down this bar to his son and grandson, who are Mike Sr. and Mike Jr. on the photo on the right, he's following that tradition that a lot of the Filipino bartenders did, where they incorporated their passion and what they did, shared their secrets with their family and their families only. This is something that I want to share with you guys, that this was pointed out by a friend of mine, Boris Hamilton. If you look at Don the Beachcomber on the upper left, that was Don's Beachcomber Cafe. And if you look at the way the bar was laid out, and then you looked at Don the Beachcomber on the right, upper right, which is the Don the Beachcomber Chicago, Illinois location, you look at the way the bar is laid out. And then you look at the Tiki Tea down below, and you look at the way the bar is laid out. It's really interesting how you have the L-shaped bar on the left with the tables on the right. Don the Beachcomber in Hollywood was where Ray Buin got his start. Don the Beachcomber in Chicago is where Mariano Licudine got his start. And if you look at the Tiki Tea, it's laid out very much the same. I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's talk about Mariano. So Mariano is the guy that came from Don the Beachcomber in Chicago and opened up the bar at the Mai-Kai. He was brought in to create their drink program, and he created 48 original drinks when he came to the Mai-Kai. He started out at the Don the Beachcomber in Hollywood for a brief stint before he went to Chicago. And before the Mai-Kai, he was at Don's for 16 years. So he's a seasoned veteran at this point. And when he got down to the Mai-Kai, if you look at that first bullet on the right-hand column, you'll see that he also continued the lost art of tropical mixology. Again, through the lean decades, the Mai-Kai, not Mariano himself. Mariano passed away in 1980, I believe, at the age of 73, but he handed down a legacy that they practiced the art of the tropical mixology with the secret syrups, but they took it a step farther, and they were doing it behind closed doors, and literally behind closed doors. So what they were doing is they were creating these drinks out of sight from what could possibly be competitors coming in and seeing how they're making their drinks. Because back at that time, you had other bars that were trying to poach their competitors' best bartenders. Bartenders were a thing. Like again, if we go back to Ray Buin, having fans basically following him from bar to bar, a lot of the competitors took note of that and knew that, hey, if we get this guy, he's going to bring his previous customers with him, in addition to the new customers that they're going to get anyway. So Mariano helped keep those drinks even more secret by doing it behind closed doors. And so when you ordered the drinks, they would come through a trap door. You couldn't see how they were made. And Mariano did something that, again, is another practice that happens today with many tropical bars. He would retool the drinks that he was making at Don the Beachcomber and improve them in his own way. And because the drink was different now, he would rename the drink. So the Cobra's Fang became a Cobra's Kiss. Dr. Funk became a Dr. Fong. The Vicious Virgin became the Impatient Virgin. Beachcomber's Gold became Liquid Gold, and so on and so on. Again, this is a practice that happens a lot today. And I don't profess to be an expert on Mariano and the Mai-Kai. I know what I know about him because, you know, his history does excite me. But the real experts here are our friends Tim Glasner and Jim Hayward. They run Swankpad and Atomic Grog, swankpad.org and atomicgrog.com. As a matter of fact, Tim Glasner wrote a book on the Mai-Kai. And so if you want to learn more about Mariano and about the Mai-Kai and the legacy of that restaurant, you can check out their websites and their Instagram pages and follow them. They're very active, especially Jim Hayward's Atomic Grog is very active with all kinds of articles about that kind of stuff. And Tim has a great book out right now. So just going back to what I mentioned before, this is a picture of the Molokai bar. And if you look at the bar, there are no bottles. So there are no bartenders. When you order a drink at this bar, you are not going to see a bartender pull bottles off the shelf and mix it in front of you on the counter. The order goes to the back where the bartenders make it behind this particular wall you are looking at. And they come out through a little trap door that's served to you by a cocktail waitress, keeping that lost art of secrecy alive. Okay, I want to talk about Tony Ramos because Tony Ramos was a Don the Beachcomber bartender as well. He bartended at the Don the Beachcomber in Palm Springs, which today, if you go there today, is the Bootlegger Tiki Bar. He also bartended at the San Diego Don the Beachcomber, the China Trader in Burbank, the Luau, just like a lot of the Filipino bartenders. He's credited with creating the Hawaiian Eye cocktail at the China Trader in 1963 when the cast of that television series would come in at the end of the day and sit at the bar and order drinks from him. Fast forward a couple of decades when this Polynesian pop movement started to basically die out. And Tony Ramos was discovered bartending at the Madame Wu's. And Jeff Berry and Sven Kirsten and a few of those folks, they would sit at the bar and order the old Don the Beachcomber cocktails that Tony Ramos could still make for you while they listened to exotica music on a boombox. I thought that was kind of a fun story. I put Ciudad in there because that there's something significant about that as well, and we're going to go back to that in a second. But just like the bartenders before him that came from Don's, he continued the lost art of tropical mixology, again, practice of secret syrups, through the lean decades of the 80s and 90s when he didn't have to, right? Because this was no longer a thing. Tony's very instrumental in my opinion, to the cocktail revival. Because when Jeff Berry was collecting recipes and information for his grog log, Tony shared a lot of secrets with him. He showed him how to make the ice cone for the Navy grog. And if not for Tony, a lot of these things that that Jeff was able to document would not have been available. They would have been lost to time. The reason why I put Ciudad in there, we'll go back to that, is in the early 2000s, I want to say like 2002, maybe 2003, I was sitting at the bar with Jeff at the Tiki Tea. Jeff had mentioned to me that Tony was working at Ciudad in Los Angeles, and it was a little Mexican restaurant, and he was working the bar making margaritas all day. He'd make like 200 margaritas, and it was basically just making their house drink, and they had no idea who they had. And he still could make you those secret Don's drinks, because if you went down there, you could order them. As a matter of fact, by continuing that lost art of secret syrups and the tropical mixology, the secrecy of that, Tony was mixing syrups out of the trunk of his car, and you could still go down there and get those drinks because he was doing that. He wasn't sharing those recipes with those bartenders. But unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Tony. At one point, he moved to Las Vegas and he was never heard from again. So that's how his story ends. And if there's anybody out there that knows more, I'd love to hear it. So that's Tony. We thank him for helping with the cocktail revival and preserving some of those secrets. I also wanted to highlight Francis Cabang and the Cabang family. I'd be remiss if I didn't post a picture of him and his family, because when they opened the Royal Hawaiian in 1947, it really was a family affair. They ran that business as a family. Again, this is the Filipino way, right? The tradition, and they made famous the lapu-lapu. The lapu-lapu was their house drink, which is shrouded in a little bit of mystery. We're not really sure where the lapu-lapu came from. I read some sources that it came from the luau in Beverly Hills in the 50s. Some people say that the first time that it appeared was here at the Royal Hawaiian in Laguna Beach. I really don't know where the lapu-lapu came from, but they made this their signature cocktail because, again, it's named after a Filipino folk hero, Filipino war hero, Chief Lapu-Lapu, who defeated Magellan. And if you go to the Royal Hawaiian today, you can still order that lapu-lapu, and it's known all throughout that community. People, Tiki people or not, they know that drink and they love it. This is something that the Cabang family had a hand in making, giving attention to. Now at the bottom here, on the bottom left, this is a picture of Francis Cabang Jr. You'll see him also in the top left photo on the far left. The person in the center of the photo in the top left photo is Francis Cabang Sr. When Francis Cabang Sr. passed, Francis Cabang Jr. took over the business. And you can see him working a wok here in the bottom left-hand picture at the Royal Hawaiian back in the day. The Royal Hawaiian was, again, Filipino-centric, Filipino family-owned. You can tell by looking at the carvings here. The carvings on the left photo, that's done by Andres Bumatay. Andre Bumatay was also a Filipino immigrant that carved tikis for a lot of the tiki bars and restaurants in the mid-century. And the tiki on the bottom right was carved by mainland Guanko, who is also a Filipino immigrant. If you look at the photo here on the top right, that's the picture that's posted at Francis Cabang Jr.'s obituary. He sadly passed away recently, just in 2019. So I know we're talking about tropical cocktails and the Filipino bartenders, but I'd be remiss if I did not also highlight the Filipino influence on the genre as a whole. We have a couple of carvers here that I'd like to give some attention to. Mainland Guanko, for example, is one of them. He was also an immigrant from the Philippines that came to leave his mark in the Filipino, in the tiki bar world. He carved the tikis that you see at the Con Tiki in Tucson, who claims to have the record for having the most mainland Guanko tikis in one spot. He also carved the tikis that are in Sam's Seafood, which later became Don the Beachcomber in Huntington Beach. Tikis at the Tahitian Village, the Tropics Motel in Palm Springs, which is where the reef exists today, the original birth home of Tiki Oasis, and the Kapukai in Cucamonga, California, which is Rancho Cucamonga today. What's Mainland Guanko's contribution to the tiki bar world as a Filipino carver? Well, we have mugs that are modeled after his tikis. The ones on the left, that's a shameless plug of some mugs that I worked on with Tiki Diablo. If you look at the upper left-hand photo, those are 3 Mainland Guanko carved tikis that resided outside of a reptile shop that held the awning up. That was at Hobby City in Anaheim. They were removed a few years ago and nobody knows where they went. But as a tribute to Mainland Guanko and those tikis, and I'm so proud of my my Filipino heritage and how it helped shape the world of tiki. I created a trio with Tiki Diablo, and Tiki Diablo carved these with those tikis as models. This is a Mainland Guanko set that's long been sold out. You can see that there, as well as on the right, we have tikis by Gecko, tiki mugs by Gecko. These are Mainland Guanko tikis that he made for La Mariano. Gecko is also a Filipino carver, so I found that a bit apropos. And if you look above that on the upper right, the Mainland Guanko tikis that you see there in the Kon-Tiki Farm has made a tribute mug to the main one right there in the dining room, if you've ever been there. And I think these mugs are these are older mugs, so I don't know if any of these are still available. I know the ones that I have that I made on the bottom left, they've long been sold out. You might have to find those on eBay. I think the Tiki Farm one is also discontinued. I don't know if the Gecko ones are still available. And let's also talk about Andre Bumatai. So Bumatai was another prolific Filipino carver that decorated a lot of these tiki bars that we enjoy today. Again, the Royal Hawaiian in Laguna Beach, the Tahitian in Beverly Hills, Kelbo's, the Royal Tahitian in Ontario, and the Konopali and Rosemead. And there's also more. They pop up all the time. Bumatai was famous for his particular large bug-eyed style and his contribution to the tiki world. We have mugs by him. The original Bumatai mug came from the Islander. It was also an illustration. It was based on an illustration on their menu, which was based on one of his tikis. And then we have tribute mugs that come from Gecko, Tiki Diablo, and Tiki Rob. Also for La Mariana and Latitude 29, which is Jeff Berry's bar out in New Orleans. So really great stuff. And as I mentioned, you know, we're influenced by so many different things, right? You know, Don's staff, they were all mostly Filipinos who would bring in their family members who needed jobs. And so I pose a question to you guys, if, you know, how much of an influence do you think that had on Don? For me, I think that there was very much of an influence. We see these photos of Don sitting at a table covered in banana leaves, and they're having these big feasts, these, you know, these luau feasts. And these come from postcards. That's a practice in the Filipino culture called the boodle fights. It's a culinary experience where copious amounts of food are served tabletop, usually eaten together with friends and family. The term is derived from kit and caboodle. Caboodle is further derived from boodle or booty, a form of a prize. You can see the similarities here. There was the table's covered in banana leaves, and then we put all of our food on the center of the table and we eat together. So this is something that actually started. It originated in the Philippine Military Academy. It was a way for commanding officers to eat together with their army as a symbol of camaraderie, brotherhood, and equality. You can look this up. You can type in boodle fight on Google. You can type in boodle fight on YouTube. And I can't help but see the similarities to the table that Don is eating at. So I throw that out there. Is that part of the Filipino influence? I don't know. But this is something that originated in the Philippine Military Academy. So it's something that I can't help but notice. Now, I want to talk about Trader Vic for a little bit. Trader Vic was a competitor to Don. And for those of you that don't know his story, basically Trader Vic was running a little place called Hinky Dinks. It was themed like a trapper lodge. And when he came down to Don the Beachcomber, he was mesmerized by the environment and the drinks. And he went back to his Hinky Dinks restaurant and turned it into a tropical theme instead, changed his name to Trader Vic, and started creating tropical cocktails. The legend is that he enjoyed a cubicula so much when he was at Don's that he tried to reverse engineer it, and he came up with the Mai-Kai. So he's one of the early Tiki pioneers as well. Excuse me. And so we look at some of the influence here too. Trader Vic is largely known for having employed Chinese bartenders, and which the Chinese bartenders and Chinese managers hired other Chinese because they were also just like the Filipinos, they would hire their own kind. But I can't help but wonder how much of an influence there was with the Filipino culture and Trader Vic's. If we look at these menus, the menus, these are very much of, in the style of Trader Vic's. And then we look at Filipino folk art. They look very similar to me. So for example, if you go to Salo Salo, it's a Filipino restaurant in West Covina, and look at the art on the wall. Same with the Salo Salo in, I think it's in Cerritos. Or you go to Manila Sunset in Rancho Cucamonga. The artwork and the style, it's very similar. So is there an influence as well on Trader Vic's? I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. So now we have Don Beach and Trader Vic. And, these guys were competing staunchly with each other. I can't help but see the similarities in the hat, the cigar, the chair. They competed with each other, and everybody copied them. So Kelbos, Kontiki ports, the Kona Kai, the Luau, all over the country, people started building their own Polynesian temples and competed with Don and Vic. And as we know the story today, devolution, 80s and 90s, resurgence, 90s and 2000s, and here we are today. Where can you go today if you want to experience that Don the Beachcomber lost art of mixology? Well, there's really only two places that have a direct lineage. One of them is the Tiki Tea, because it is run by Ray Buen's son and grandson, Mike and Mike Buen. And Ray was one of Don's original bartenders. A lot of the syrups and recipes were secret to Don and his bartenders. And a lot of those syrups, the recipes to those syrups, they were never shared anywhere else. So they went with Ray. They came down into his son and grandson, and the Tiki Tea still employs the use of a lot of those syrups today. I think they are using somewhere between 13 and 14 syrups across their various cocktails. I think they have 96 cocktails, somewhere around there. And so if you want to experience some of those early drinks like the Bayanihan and the Anting Anting and some of the early Don's drinks, hit up the Tiki Tea. And of course, the other place is the Mai-Kai because of Mariano's legacy. So Mariano was one of the bartenders at the, again, he started at the Don the Beachcomber in Hollywood, found his way to Chicago, and worked for Don's for 16 years before he started the bar program at the Mai-Kai. And the way that they are doing the bar program there too is always been the way that it was, right? So those are the only two places that have direct lineage back to the original Don the Beachcomber. And that all comes from, again, the two of Don's Filipino bartenders. And of course, we continue the tradition here at the Desert Oasis Room. This is a little shot of my Polynesian themed space. So where can you go if you want to learn more? Right now, I think the most comprehensive information about the Filipino bartenders that worked for Don's, and in general, even the Tiki and some of the other tiki spots that we know of from the days of Polynesian Pop era. Sip and Safari is a really great read. Jeff Berry has done so much research here, and I can't thank him enough for highlighting those heroes of the tiki bar movement. If not for Jeff Berry, we wouldn't have the comprehensive knowledge of not only the drinks, but the stories behind the people that worked at the bar and that Filipino legacy. Of course, it started with the Grog Log. So I would recommend that you get either of those two books. If you don't have one or the other, get them both. Of course, the Book of Tiki, which we learn about some more of the legacy of the Filipino immigrants and their impact on tiki. The carvers are in there, Guanko and Bumatai, as well as stories from the Tiki Tea, which also Jeff Berry wrote. So there's more information in there as well. The book Mai-Kai, History and Mystery of the Iconic Tiki Restaurant by our friend Tim Glasner. There's information in there from Mariano, and a couple of books that don't get a lot of attention. The Adobo Road, which is by Marvin Gapultos. He has a chapter in there about the Filipino bartenders and Filipinos in Hollywood. I took a little screenshot here of one of the pages inside. They talk about 7 Cs, and they also talk about the Filipino bartenders back in the early 20th century. So those are a couple of books there that I would recommend you guys pick up. And just some acknowledgments of the sources that I used. Every person listed here contributed to the knowledge that I have, that I shared with you. I stand on the shoulders of those who did the hard work and the interviews and the research before me. And so I want to make sure that they get the recognition they deserve. Jeff Berry, Sven Kirsten, Mike Boone Sr., if you listen to the podcast, I've interviewed him a couple of times and he shares a lot of stories. Tim Glasner again, Marvin Gapultos, Carolyn Pardilla, you might know her as Carolyn on Crack on Instagram. She is a writer for Los Angeles Magazine, and you'll see here a few other links to some resources that I used and that you can peruse if you'd like. And this is just some of my contact information if you want to stay connected with me. I release a podcast. I try to do it weekly. All this information that I'm sharing with you today, I release it in my particular way. That is how I document history of Polynesian Pop and Tiki. I also do things on YouTube. If you'd like to watch our channel, please subscribe if that's the type of thing that you enjoy, and connect to me on social media as well through my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Polynesian Pop. I'm happy to add you on there and continue to chat with you. So with that said, I'm going to bring it back to our host.
Adrian, this is amazing. First off, thank you for putting the slides together, for educating us on the Filipino culture in Tiki. So I've learned a lot, and the food slides that you had at the end made my stomach growl. Right. So um, thank you for putting that in.
Thank you.
We do have some questions from our audience members today. So first off, what is your favorite cocktail?
Ooh, that's an easy one for me. I like the raised mistake. And the raised mistake, it's all kinds of things. It's the taste, but it's also the story, and it's also that it came from Ray. And when you buy the raised mistake, it supports a family-owned bar. Everything about it is what makes it my favorite drink. So that was an easy one.
That was an easy one. Okay. Awesome. Who or what inspired you to collect all things Tiki?
I've been asked that before, and the art spoke to me. It was something that when I was a kid, I remember when I was 12 or 13 years old, being somewhere that was tropical themed and saying to my sisters, "Oh, I want my house to look like this," and they laughed at me. And I thought, "Oh, is that weird?" But it was the art that really spoke to me. It was the carvings, it was the whole aesthetic. And every time I found something interesting, whether it was a tiki mug or it was like a little Coco Joe's carving or whatever it was, I'd buy it and I'd bring it home and I'd put it on a shelf. And I didn't know that I was collecting. It wasn't until a few years later that I realized, oh, I guess I'm a collector. This was before any Book of Tiki or any Tiki Oasis or Tiki Central or anything that this was like in the early 90s. So it was just something I don't know what it was that attracted me to it, but it was just something that I felt a connection to. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, have you counted how many mugs you have in your collection?
Yeah, I stopped a couple years ago. I was at over 1,000. I stopped counting. I don't need to know. So, and I don't buy everything, for the record. So there's just a lot of mugs out there. So
yeah, I mean, it's super hard not to buy everything that you see because there's just so many great mugs out there.
Yeah, there is.
Do you know, are there any Filipino-owned bars open today?
There are. So again, I would start with the Tiki Tea, Filipino owned, and they go all the way back. The legacy goes all the way back to Don the Beachcomber. But some of the newer ones, we lost one of my favorite ones because of COVID, because of businesses being shut down. It was called Mam Sir. And Charles Laloya, I think is how you pronounce his last name. If you follow him on Instagram, I know he's going to be doing something again. He had a really great craft cocktail bar almost across the street from the Tiki Tea. It was just on the other side of the intersection. But one that's still around is called Jennifer. It's a gin bar in Old Filipino Town in downtown LA. It's owned by 3 women, all Filipino, all from UCLA. It was something that they were passionate about doing. And so they opened a bar there that Die Lovely has performed there before. And they make great cocktails there. So yeah, if you're ever in LA, Jennifer.
Yep. We'll have to go visit.
Yeah.
We have a few more questions. Is there any connection between the poo-poo platter and pulutan?
Ooh, great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
But that is something that sounds interesting to research. I don't know, but that sounds interesting. I'll have to look that up and see what I find.
Okay, yeah, we'll be waiting to find out the answer. I'll have to research that as well because I'm interested to know.
That is a great question. That's a great question. I love that.
Thanks to whoever asked it. Another question we have is it true that Trader Vic used to be in disguise at the Don the Beachcomber bar?
I've heard the same.
Okay.
I've heard the same. I've heard that he would also send in his bartenders. So to watch Don's bartenders make the cocktails. I mean, I couldn't tell you for sure because I'm not from that era. I wasn't there. I don't know anybody that was. So I can't give you a definitive answer from that. But I've heard the same thing. So it's a fun rumor.
I like that rumor. What are your thoughts on claims of cultural appropriation in Tiki culture?
So I don't think that there's an easy answer to that, but I will say this. Is there cultural appropriation? Yes and no. I think it's more complex than having a yes answer or a no answer. I think some things can be offensive, and I think some things that people are calling racially insensitive, I don't necessarily agree with. From my particular perspective, based on just the information that I presented today, a lot of this tiki culture was started by Filipino immigrants, the bartenders, the carvers, the servers, and the cultural influences, for example, you see in some of those slides that I presented. So it's hard for me to be offended by something that, in my eyes, the immigrants before me helped build. So that's how I feel. But yeah, are there things that I find offensive in other ways? Sure. I think that lends to a deeper discussion, though. I don't think it's as easy as answering yes or no.
Understood. Yeah, it's very complex.
Sure, it's very complex.
And yeah, and you're absolutely right. There's not a yes or no. It's just this history is just, not only does it go back very far, but there's just so many different layers that needs to be unpacked.
I just know that when people say, when they say to me, well, you should be offended by this, I'll think like, all the bartenders came from where I come from. Should I be offended? I'm proud of their contribution to the tropical cocktail movement, because without those guys, we wouldn't have what we have today. And I have a theory. I say this all the time. The bartenders are the guys that work behind the bar and make the drinks, and they just like the chef is the guy in the kitchen that makes the dishes. So I believe a lot of this stuff came from these bartenders, right? Maybe they weren't given the credit that they deserve, but let's think about this. This was in the 1930s when we didn't have the same civil freedoms that minorities back then were discriminated heavily upon. So they're not going to be getting the same kind of credit that they deserve to get. Someone else to take the credit for them, and I believe that, as not good feeling as that is to say.
Yeah, thank you. Another question we have is, how do you see Tiki going forward in these times of keeping ourselves isolated, as Tiki is a real community and a friendship thing?
Wow, it's a great question. I think that with COVID affecting how businesses can operate day to day, this complex issue of cultural appropriation, in addition to devolution, plain and simple, I think Tiki is facing something that it's never faced in the past. So I don't know. I will say that history seems to be repeating itself in the form of, devolved things. That's what killed Tiki the first time around. I'd hate to see history repeat itself. So I don't know. I think that's a question that I'd have to think about a little bit more deeply. I do think that if people embrace appreciation versus appropriation, which again can be a very fine line, I think that's something that could keep the subculture alive. And appreciation can come in the form of many ways. It could come in the form of supporting small businesses when they need it most. So that's another complex question that I'd have to give a little bit more thought to.
Yeah, our audience members are asking amazing questions.
Yeah, these are great questions. Deep
we we have two more. One, is there a comprehensive list of all the Filipino created cocktails?
I don't think that there is one that exists, but maybe I'll put that together and see what I can find out. Again, as I mentioned a couple questions ago, I don't think that they got all the credit for the things that they should have gotten credit from. And so we'll never know if there's things missing from that list, or if there are things that, that exist that we just don't know about. But I don't think there's a comprehensive list at this point. I'll see if I can put one together.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our final question for today is the building where the original Christian's hut still there?
It is. And if we're talking about the building in Catalina Island, I don't believe it is. The one in Newport Beach, it is. And I can't remember what it is today, but it does exist. But maybe what I'll do is I'll look up the address, and I will go down there, and I'll do like a short video and put it up on my YouTube. And we'll see what's there. That might be a fun thing to go explore. So
yeah.
But the original one that was in Catalina Island was on the Isthmus, and it was, from what I understand, was just a temporary spot. So I don't think it's there anymore. But that might be another fun one to explore as well. So we'll see. I'll do some research, and maybe I'll bring my video camera with me, and we'll do some urban archaeology.
That would be so fun.
Yeah.
Well, Adrian, thank you again, for putting the presentation together, for answering all of our questions. And thank you to Ms. Lovely for, introducing Adrian and for being with us here today. For those that joined the conversation today, please consider a donation directly to the Desert Oasis Room. You can make the donation at desertoasisroom.com/donate. We hope that you will join us next month on the second Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific as we celebrate Black History Month. If you're interested in joining Tiki Oasis Diversity and Inclusion Council or have an idea for a future topic, please send us an email at info@tikioasis.com. Until next month, bye everyone.